Friday on Daily Delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Hope you guys are having a good day out there. Hope you guys enjoyed all of the content on Thursday. 2 shows, split it into 2 shows. Had the episode that was all Wolves with Chris Hine. Had the show that was built around my interview with Bally Sports North General Manager Randy Stevens. Go back and listen to those if you missed one or the other. But yeah, thanks for listening. Of course, today's show, really good. Marcus Fuller from the Star Tribune joins me here in just a little bit. Covers Gophers men's basketball. We are going to talk about name, image, and likeness. We are going to talk about the transfer portal. We're going to talk about just the totality of what has happened to Ben Johnson's team this offseason. Losing Payne, losing Elijah Hawkins, losing Cam Christie, all of these guys that have come and gone. A lot of them impacted, influenced by NIL deals elsewhere. And just kind of who's replacing them, what the landscape looks like right now. So Marcus and I will talk a lot about that and where the Gophers and college sports go from here. Some WNBA thoughts at the end of the show, a little bit of Twin stuff here in a minute. First, though, what did I miss? Thought it would be fun. Not fun for me, maybe necessarily, but fun to think back to the things we sometimes got wrong about the Timberwolves in their journey to where they are right now. 6 playoff wins in a row, up 2-0 against the Denver Nuggets, heading into Game 3 tonight at Target Center, 8:30 p.m. What did we get wrong? What did I get wrong? Here are 5 things I got wrong. I'll balance it out a little bit at the end with some things I got right, but here are 5 things I got wrong about the Timberwolves. A lot of these owing to impatience and the reason why I am not allowed to run this team, and people who have a little bit more patience are allowed to run this team. Number 1, it was a little over 3 years ago. I still remember this. I've thought about, should I go and try to scrub all of this from the permanent record? But there's too much to delete. There's tweets, there's blog posts, there's a podcast, there's a lot of stuff I would have to delete from the record of March 9th, 2021. It was the midst of my deep infatuation with how do you get the Wolves better at the trade deadline. John Collins from Atlanta was my target of great interest, and I opined that maybe, just maybe, the Wolves should trade rookie Anthony Edwards as part of a package to land John Collins. In fact, I might have even thrown in Naz Reid in one of those deals. Here is a little snippet from the podcast, the Daily Delivery podcast. It had been around for a little over a month at that point, from March 9th, 2021. What about option number 2? Anthony Edwards, Jake Layman, and Naz Reid for Snell and Collins. So you're giving up on your number 1 overall pick pretty early. You're giving Jake Layman, a solid veteran, and Naz Reid, a cost-controlled, intriguing center who's been a pretty efficient scorer himself this season. Maybe that works. Is giving up Edwards a lot? Yeah, but before the draft, the Wolves were talking about maybe trading that pick. If you could trade that pick for a guy who's averaged 21 points and 10 rebounds last season, would you have done that at the time? Yeah, probably, or at least maybe. Last trade, Beasley, Edwards, and Naz Reid for Tony Snell, John Collins, and Cam Reddish. I think we're getting closer to the truth here that it would probably take a couple of pretty big assets to get a player of Collins' stature. Now, I don't know that exactly. I don't know exactly what the market is. But if you're enamored with this idea of, acquiring players on the timeline of Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell, Collins is only 23. He'll be 24 at the start of next season. He kind of fits that timeline. You have to pay him a lot, but you're also sending out quite a bit of salary. Is that the kind of player you want to kind of go all in on, the kind of player that's gettable right now and that you could re-sign as a restricted free agent? I'm intrigued by it. Obviously, it was good the Timberwolves didn't do that. Chris Finch had just been hired, by the way, like a couple weeks ago, taking over mid-season for Ryan Saunders. The Wolves were in the midst of a tough stretch. I think they were 7-29 at that point or something like that. They had been really, really, really bad at that point in their progress. But Finch came in, took over, did a better job towards the end of that season, and things did get somewhat better the rest of that year. Then obviously the year after that, they make the playoffs. Anthony Edwards becomes the player he is now. Naz Reid becomes the player he is right now. John Collins, nice player, but kind of just a guy, right? Like, he was not the franchise cornerstone if you would have tried to build around D'Angelo Russell, Karl Anthony Towns, and John Collins, you would be a 30 to 35 win team in perpetuity, which is exactly where you don't want to be. So strike that from the record, strike that from your minds. Even if I brought that back to you right now, this is a lesson in patience, obviously, what Anthony Edwards could become. I wanted the shortcut. I wanted them to be better right then and there, and that would have been a terrible idea. So I got that wrong. I came around quickly on Ant, but I got that wrong in that moment. Number 2, I turned on Rudy Gobert at some point last year. I loved the trade initially. That's one of the things I got right. I loved the trade initially. Like I tweeted something like they get traded 8 dimes for $1, basically. I liked going all in on a player. Of course, last year he wasn't healthy. He wasn't the player you thought he was. And if he wasn't going to be the player you thought he was, not only were you handcuffed in terms of the assets you gave up, you were handcuffed in terms of you were no longer able to make another move like that because you gave up so much draft capital. You can't trade draft picks in consecutive years. So the Gobert trade basically meant you weren't going to be able to make another one of these blockbuster deals. So if Rudy wasn't going to be that player, that was my big beef with that. Then obviously comes back this year, wins Defensive Player of the Year, anchors the best defense in the league, things like that. So that obviously worked out, but I turned on it at some point. I didn't turn on it initially. I liked it initially. I didn't turn on it quite as hard as other people, like all-time bust, things like that. But I was worried about the long-term prognosis of that trade. I don't think I was alone, but I was definitely wrong about that. Again, patience, patience, patience. Speaking of patience, this past offseason, I was convinced they needed to trade Karl Anthony Towns. I saw the looming kind of salary cap crunch coming this offseason. I saw Cat's trade value maybe, not as high as it could ever be, but he'd come back from the injury last year, the calf strain. He was like, when is it going to get higher? Like, obviously, he comes back this year. He's an all-star. Hard to imagine where they would be right now without Cat. Obviously, they have good players aside from him. They can win games without him, even when he's in foul trouble or injured, things like that. But to make the kind of playoff run they are on right now, his performance in a lot of these games has been excellent. The defense, the offense, everything has been there. The willingness to sacrifice, he has been excellent. Trading him this past offseason, this would not be the same team without Karl Anthony Towns. They can deal with whatever ramifications are coming when they come, and if they make a deep playoff run, you can make a huge argument that they should be keeping this core together. This past offseason, because of the way last year went, because there were rumblings of Tim Connolly maybe leaving after a year. It was the Washington job, I believe, that was open. There was all this talk, like, is it, would he leave? And I was like, is it a bad thing if he left? Yes, that would have been a bad thing. He's been very good this year. The moves he's made have proved to be the backbone of turning this team from a good team into a great team. And he had a vision. He had the patience I didn't have, right? He has the patience a lot of us don't have when we kind of deal in the day-to-day, the moment-to-moment. He had that patience. He and I talked about that early in this year when they got off to like a 15-4 start, had him on the podcast. He had the patience. He will always have the patience. That is what his foundation is, and he is being rewarded for that this year, even if a lot of us were like, yeah, Tim Connolly, this isn't going that well. Yeah, it's going a lot better now. The fifth thing in this top 5 list, bottom 5 list, I didn't think they could beat Phoenix. I got that wrong. Some of us got that wrong, too. I mean, they were 0-3 against Phoenix in the regular season. You looked at it, you're like, man, the worst possible matchup they could have gotten in the playoffs is Phoenix because of the perimeter scoring, the playoff excellence of Kevin Durant, things like that. Well, they shut down Durant, Booker, Bradley Beal, swept him in 4 games. A lot of us were wrong about that. I couldn't have been more wrong about that. I didn't think they had that in them. I thought it was going to be a 6 and out kind of series. Instead, here they are, sweeping that series up 2-0 against Denver with a chance to really, really, really take control of the series tonight. Now, like I said, didn't get it all wrong. I loved the Mike Conley trade from the jump, and I think I was vindicated on that very easily. The D'Angelo Russell out, Conley in, Nickeil Alexander-Walker in, a few second-round picks in. It was a master class in extracting value while also getting rid of a player that didn't quite fit in D'Angelo Russell in what you were trying to do here. He needs the ball too much. He's too much of a volume kind of player, and defensively, he is a liability. So to make that swap, to get everything you did, I was on board with that from the jump, and it has been vindicated this year. Like I said, I was in on the Rudy trade at the beginning, so I think I got that right, at least in the beginning. I love the Kyle Anderson signing a couple years ago. I think that has borne out to be true. And I've always been a Chris Finch guy. I've never wavered in that. People have taken their shots at him a little bit over the years in terms of, is this really the coach for them? Especially last year when they went 42-40 and weren't making the adjustments they maybe needed to make right away. It was like, is Chris Finch on the hot seat? It was like, I don't think Finch is the problem. I was a little frustrated with some of his rotations, his adjustments, things like that. But again, he has been playing the long game, just like the Wolves have been for the last 2, 3, 4 years, especially since Tim Conley got here a couple of years ago. You got to remember that. And Finch now, I think, hard to say anything other than he's a top 5 coach in the league right now, and that has been borne out this year. So hope you enjoyed that. I can admit when I'm wrong. I can admit when we got some things wrong. Definitely was wrong about a lot of that. The lesson here, the key takeaway is this. A lot of times in sports, you have to be patient. Speaking of patience, let's talk a little Twins before we get to Marcus Fuller. They won again, 11-1. Yesterday, a 5-2 homestand against 2 good teams, Boston and Seattle. The offense continues to roll. To me, though, the most encouraging thing from the homestand was the pitching staff. Pablo Lopez was excellent in 2 starts after being a little shaky before that, kind of the start of the year. There was some concern about some of his outings. Velocity was down in one of those. You're like, okay, what's wrong with Pablo Lopez? He's not pitching like an ace. He is pitching like an ace again. They got a really good start from Simeon Woods Richardson during the homestand. They got 2 good starts from Chris Paddock, starting to solidify the bottom part of the rotation while also bolstering that kind of very top spot with Pablo Lopez. The lesson in patience is this. They were 7-13 at one point. They are now 22-15. They're 15-2 in their last 17 games after going 5-12 in their previous 17 games. That is a 10-game difference. Can't define a baseball season by 1/10 of the schedule, and I think we tried to do that. We panicked a little too early on the Twins, and again, not to say things won't turn again at some point, not to say they're going to keep playing at this pace. I don't think anybody expects them to, but they are certainly not as bad as they were in the first 18, 20 games of this season, and that is another good lesson in patience. Glad to be joined by Gophers men's basketball reporter Marcus Fuller from the Star Tribune. Obviously, Marcus covers more than just Gopher men's basketball, but that is his primary beat. And Marcus, the transfer portal makes this time of year busier for you than I imagine it used to be.
Yeah, I'm probably low on the totem pole when it comes to busy. The coaches, obviously, and the players, they're the ones that this is the busiest that it's ever been, probably ever, because rules have changed and there's a lot of movement out there. NIL has made this a lot more interesting in my field, but for the coaches, I mean, it's just a headache. And Ben Johnson definitely experienced that. But yeah, I mean, again, there's no off season in the spring when it comes to college basketball or college football, especially. There's so many transfers every day. Someone could leave for more money.
Now, the transfer portal window you can't go into the portal anymore, right? Because that window closed May 1st, but you can still get players who were in the portal. Give me a rundown of all the comings and goings. I mean, we thought for a while that there might be some stability here for Ben Johnson's Gophers just because of the improvements they made this season, because of what some players had maybe said at the Big Ten tournament, but give me kind of the lay of the land of where their roster was before the season ended and where it is now.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like so long ago, the Big Ten tournament, right? I mean, that it might as well be like, a year ago.
It was a couple months ago. That's all it was.
So much has changed. I get it. Like, people, it's hard to make a decision in a vacuum. Like, you have to weigh a lot of options. Certain players said certain things at the Big Ten tournament and even in NIT, and then all of a sudden things change. I think the way to look at it is, year one, Ben Johnson took over for Richard Pitino. He had to replace 10 players. This year, he's already lost 7. So, and this is coming off of, his third year where they had improvement. Why did all these people leave? In the years past, obviously a coaching change would affect that.
Sure.
Some dysfunction on the team, playing time, just, obviously a big time program pulling someone away. Now it's all about NIL. They all like Ben Johnson. There's no bad blood there, although obviously on the coach's side of it, they're pretty frustrated. But they ended up losing 7 players to the portal. And, we're talking about 3 starters in Pharrell Payne, Cam Christie, and Elijah Hawkins. Now, Hawkins and Pharrell Payne did sign with other teams, Texas Tech and Texas A&M respectively. So they'll both be, and maybe even playing each other. We'll see. They're not in the same conference anymore. But, I feel like Texas has got a lot of money, and Texas schools, a lot of oil money there, and their NIL is a lot more than it would be here. But at the same time, Pharrell Payne did leave pretty quickly. I would say after the season ended. Elijah Hawkins said a couple times, and the Gophers even announced that he would be back, and he still ended up leaving before the portal closed, and that was due to NIL, and so was Pharrell Payne. And so when you look at the roster, there's only 4 players from last season's team with eligibility left that will be back. And Dawson Garcia and Mike Mitchell are the starters.
Yep.
And Dawson Garcia was the big fish. Right. Apologies for my dog, but yeah, I mean, he's the one that turned down a lot of money to stay.
Yeah, I mean, Garcia stays, and you got Parker Fox, kind of your one of the key reserves. But losing those 3 guys, especially off of the season they had, I mean, there was talk that, hey, if everybody comes back, and that was always going to be a big if, but if everybody comes back, you could be talking about a team that, hey, top half of the Big Ten, maybe even a top 25 team in the country if things break right, NCAA tournament aspirations. It's got to be frustrating to try to build a team and think you've got something going if you're Ben Johnson, and then see 3 of your best players leave, and 2 so far for sure, and then Christie obviously in the portal right now, and obviously has the potential to be drafted still, but you would imagine that he's not going to be back. So 3 key players lost off of what could have been a really good team next year, and still could be, but you're missing some key pieces. And 10 years ago, this wouldn't have been, you wouldn't have been even thinking about this, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago. A lot has happened. I would say, just, in Ben Johnson's tenure, I mean, when he took over for Richard Pitino, there was really talk about paying players, and then NIL came about after he took the job. And that's when it really changed, the transfer portal as well. I mean, at that time, there was still a waiver process, in Ben Johnson's first year. I mean, they had to get a waiver for Dawson Garcia to play right away after his second transfer. So, I think that in this day and age, what Ben Johnson has done after losing the 7 players, I think it should be noted that he brought in some solid pieces.
Yeah.
And he filled the holes that he needed to. Now, I mean, these are a lot of mid-major players. There's a couple guys that he did sign. Femi Odukale from New Mexico State, but he also played 2 years at a high major, Pitt and Seton Hall. He's a 6'6" wing, and they did get Brennan Rigsby is a 6'3" guard from Oregon who played a couple years there at a high major level. So I think those 2 guys, you would think that would make the transition to the Big Ten a lot easier. Caleb Williams was a D3 McAllister guard that scored 41 points on the Gophers in an exhibition. So, he's used to the barn. He's used to Minnesota. He'll be an exciting player that they have off the bench. Again, we can talk about all the pieces. Recently, they did get a commitment and they signed a 6'10" forward from Texas San Antonio, who they also played in the preseason or the non-conference season. Did pretty well at the barn. So there's a lot of pieces there. Mainly, you were talking about 10 years ago. I just think that every year now, you're going to have to, retool maybe your entire roster because you don't know who's going to leave. And, you don't really get pieces like Garcia back in this day
Yeah.
and age, and I think that's a good start for this team.
Have coaches like Ben Johnson just kind of accepted this as the reality and been kind of maybe out in front of this a little bit more, like understanding that, hey, no matter what gets said or no matter what you might hope or think might happen, that there's the reality that some of your best guys might leave and you got to be recruiting the portal, be kind of ahead of that to make sure that you're not left without any other options? Or how do you think how do you think Ben Johnson's view of the portal has evolved over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I would say less about the portal and more about NIL.
Sure.
I think even with the portal the way it is now, where guys can leave, really after a number of transfers, with a good academic standing, a lot of these guys would not have left if it weren't for NIL.
Sure.
I mean, this is a program that was on the rise. I mean, even the guys that left were talking about if we return our entire group, then we have a chance to compete for a Big Ten title. Even Tom Izzo talked about this team being one of the favorites if it returned everyone, including Hawkins, Payne, Garcia, and Cam Christie, who's declared for the NBA draft. So NIL is something that Ben Johnson, PJ Fleck, I mean, every coach at the U continue to clamor about. We need to keep these kids, and the way we do it would be to get more opportunity for them through NIL. And that means boosters, that means fans contributing to Dinkytown athletes. Certainly we've done a really good job at the Star Tribune
Right.
of chronicling NIL in all different facets, whether it's the collective for Dinkytown, the athletes and what they're getting. I know Jeff Day did a really good story on the boosters angle and how they have to balance between giving for the university and then giving to the collective for NIL. Right. And there's going to be a day soon where the university will be the ones paying the athletes.
Yeah.
And there will be no collective. So that'll make things a lot different because, then the boosters just give to the university, and then the money that the university generates, however way, through TV or through whatever ticket sales, what have you, merchandise, a lot of that will go to NIL, because you want to keep these teams competitive and fans coming to watch games.
It changes roster building, obviously. You don't have teams staying together as much. And it's certainly in the case of the Gophers, where you lose these pieces, you're bringing in a bunch of other guys. It's almost like you have to relearn on the fly, develop chemistry quickly. It feels like it's going to be more, when that's the case, it's going to be more and more about just flat out talent and less about kind of building something over 2, 3, 4 years. As you think about the players they've brought in, and you already referenced some of them already, like how do you think they stack up in terms of helping the Gophers get to where they want to get to next year? Because, like you said, I'm not even thinking about 2 years from now. Like we don't know what the roster is going to be 2 years from now. How good can they be next year, given what they've lost versus what they're bringing in?
Well, let's put it this way. This roster will be completely different in a year because at my count, I want to say they only have maybe 3 underclassmen, and the rest are seniors. So, this is do or die. This is a sense of urgency like I've never seen. Usually you bring in a group of seniors, maybe 4 or 5 like Ben Johnson's first year, and then see it, if those guys can make a run. Well, this is an entire team of seniors.
Yeah.
The ones that I mentioned already, from high major level, I think could contribute right away. I think a piece that they really needed to replace, which you really can't replace a guy like Elijah Hawkins. I mean, almost led the nation in assists, did for a while, just totally changed the energy of this team and the style with which they play. You can't replace that speed, vision. But I think the guard position, the point guard position, will be one where that's key. I mean, Mike Mitchell's coming back. He has the ability to pass, but they need to find someone who can fill that spot. I mean, Caleb Williams is a scorer. Mike Williams is a shooter. He can pass, like I said. Rigsby from Oregon, he was more of a scorer. They're really, trying to find that right fit at guard, and be interesting to see who they add moving forward. They're still looking at adding in the portal. And I think maybe adding another guard that can handle the ball will go a long way for this team.
Almost feels like the incoming high school recruits are an afterthought's the wrong word, but like when the roster changes so much, it is so much more about the transfers and not just the incoming guys. But this kind of program does need that developmental piece too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think one college coach that I talked to, and I'll just say it's not Ben Johnson, by the way.
Yeah,
I don't
fair
want to throw
enough.
him out there, but they said I'm going to stop recruiting high school players.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not even going to do that anymore. Like, why would I? Because I have to wait for those players to develop, and I don't have time to wait. There's no
Yeah.
patience anymore. I mean, I need an older roster. I need to compete right away. There's players available in the portal that can help you right away, and then you're losing players every year. Like maybe your whole starting five or a majority of your rotation to the portal. So you can't replace that with high school players unless they end up becoming a Cam Christie where he's one and done. I mean,
Right.
Pharrell Payne, even as good as he was, he came off the bench almost the entire freshman year.
Yeah.
Same with Braden Carrington and Josh Ola Joseph. That was a really good Minnesota class that's no longer with the program. So Ben Johnson banked a lot on that
Hmm.
group being the core of his team moving forward. Along with Dawson Garcia, and Dawson's the only one left, and he was the one most. I would say everyone thought he was the most likely to leave because
Sure.
he's been in college for so long.
Yeah.
He's been in Minnesota for 2 years. He has a chance to play professionally. I think that him being back, really helps. Again, I've talked about it over and over again. Ben has something to hang his hat on, and he has someone that is a leader that's been here. That's the culture, changer. And the high school kids that are coming in, Isaac Asima is a very important piece because he's a point
Yeah.
guard. They need him to stick around. I mean,
Yeah.
no question about it. I mean, you don't want to, a lot of coaches maybe not want to recruit high school kids, but if you get players like him, and I mean, Grayson Grove's the other recruit, he has a future too, solid future. But, Isaac, in a couple years, he could be your starting point guard
Right.
as a sophomore, so, and that's an important piece when you don't have to always rely on the portal, when you have a guy that's returning that understands the culture and understands your program.
Royal Credit Union's smart checking accounts offer no monthly fees and no minimum balance. Enjoy financial freedom when you open your Royal Credit Union smart checking account online at rcu.org/go-checking. Insured by NCUA.
Couple more things for you, Marcus Fuller. One, I mean, as with how much has changed and how quickly it has changed, how do college coaches just even think about this? Do they feel a little bit defeated? Are they just like, okay, we got to roll with the punches and kind of this is the new reality and we got to get after it? Are they frustrated and mad that they've got to kind of recruit in all these different facets and that they're losing these guys? Like how are they? What's the mindset of someone like Ben Johnson right now, and how much his profession has been upended?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could, talk to these guys like every single time a guy leaves for the portal,
Right.
right? Or every time, they're trying to recruit a guy, and have a visit and then he goes somewhere else. But I would say that again, I go back to NIL. I mean, it's really out of their hands. The coaches cannot contribute. They can't recruit kids with NIL. They can't. I mean,
Right.
the collectives are the ones that will have a lot of sleepless nights because they're the ones that are dealing with the athletes on a consistent basis, negotiating contracts. I mean, there's no way around it. Talking to agents, negotiating contracts.
Yep.
It's like the pros. So, the coaches are recruiting the kids, getting them in for a visit. They say, hey, this is where you'll fit. This is your role. We love you. This is our program. And the players might like it. Their families might like it. But then the collective has to come in and seal the deal. It
Yeah.
used to be the coaches seal the deal. You have a head coach that's a really good recruiter or assistant that has relationships. Maybe it's a fan, not a fan, I'm sorry, but a player on the team, that's recruiting for you
Yeah.
that helps sell the program. But now it's the collective, and that's a lot of pressure to put on a couple guys in this case. That a few years ago they were big time fans and supporters of the U alum. one of them, and that was their role. But now it's like, okay, I gotta seal the deal on a recruit, and that's gonna make or break this team, in some cases, or a player that we're trying to retain. So I there's a lot of pressure on those guys. I feel for them. The coaches, it's out of their hands a lot of times, and that's the frustrating part, because you can't just concentrate on coaching. You can't concentrate just on recruiting. Guys like Calipari, there's a reason why he left Kentucky. As good a recruiter, he might be one of the best recruiters of all time in college basketball. And he left the biggest blue blood of them all as far as, history, because of NIL. I mean, he could not, they didn't have the bag, people want to say, that Arkansas has now.
Yeah.
That's crazy, right? To think about.
Crazy.
But
it is crazy.
It's the reality. I mean, and I'll leave it at this. If all of a sudden Minnesota had a big NIL, they could become a huge player,
right, in
recruiting and bringing in talent like immediately. That's how quickly it could happen. And it's legal. Before it used to be like, all of a sudden Minnesota gets all these players. They're doing something wrong. Well, now it's all legal. So I mean, that's why the collective and the coaches will say, I mean, all the time they can. And Mark Quill, the athletic director, let's support our NIL and our Dinky Town athletes, because that's how we're going to bring in talent. That's how we're going to win. And, they've done the best job they can with bringing in players with the NIL they have, which is a lot better than it was last year. And, the international recruiting, you're going to see a lot more of that, because they can't get NIL within the states.
Right.
And the only NIL they can get is either overseas or obviously in their home country.
Right.
And they do have one of those players that they brought in, a big man from Canada, who was one of the best rebounders in the country last year. And then they're fortunate to get him and Frank Mitchell. But yeah, this is a whole new era for Ben. If he wants to hire me as his NIL media liaison, I'll have a part-time job there, but I'm kidding. The agents are the ones that are really their role has changed in all of this. It's not just about declaring for the pros anymore. I mean, you're having agents represent everyone on the team and trying to get the best NIL.
I hear from a lot of fans, and I'm sure you do too. Maybe this is where we can leave it. Like this era of college athletics is turning off a lot of fans from what I can see, and maybe it's just a matter of adjusting to it and it'll be okay. But what do you see from that standpoint? Just fans trying to grasp how this has gone from the model that it used to be to the model that it is right now.
Yeah, I think fans they understand that this is the world they live in now, because social media and the media like us, we talk about it so much.
Yeah.
But I think that when they're asking them to give more than they already are with tickets and, supporting the program, fundraising and things like that, that's when they get frustrated, because as we all know, right, since COVID, things are more expensive and living is more expensive. So, that's the part that they can't understand. But if you want a product that's consistently winning, it's a change that you have to make. That's like, when Twitter first came out, media was complaining about having to tweet all the time and this and that, but it's part of our lives now. Right. And it's actually helped build our brand. So, you got to make that adjustment as fans, I think. And then understand that that's just a part of the way life is right now for college sports, and it's not going anywhere.
No, it's not. I mean, it might change some. It's already changed a lot just in the last couple of years in terms of how NIL and the portal work, and I'm sure there's more to come on that as the NCAA kind of figures this all out too. But yeah, you're right. We're not going back to the old way. So if you're a fan or you're a coach or you're a player, however it is, you got to figure out how to make it work within this new model. Marcus Fuller, Gophers men's basketball writer, Star Tribune, appreciate the time as always. We'll see how the rest of the portal season shakes out. We'll see how the off season and into the regular season start shaking out for them as well. And I'm sure we'll talk again sometime down the road.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. And we know Ant Edwards is not entering the portal anytime soon, so that's the part that we can all enjoy.
At least
Minnesota
there's that.
Basketball.
These long contracts in the NBA are almost the model is different there indeed. All right, thanks, Marcus.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Great stuff from Marcus. I really hope college sports at some point settles into a better equilibrium where players aren't changing teams so much every year, but players are still able to get paid and capitalize on their images, on their name, image, likeness, things like that. I think that's great. I think players getting paid is wonderful. I've come around to that idea from where I was 10, 15 years ago. What I don't like is how rosters can just get decimated. It doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem like that is the way this rule was intended. Feels like unintended consequences, which are basically, that is life in 2024, right? A lot of unintended consequences of policy, of, things that are put in motion, worldwide, end up causing a lot of dysfunction, things like that. That is how it feels like college sports is right now. Let's finish with the cooler. A happier note, Lynx tickets on sale today. Opening up the upper bowl for the Caitlin Clark Indiana Fever games. Those games are July 14th and August 24th. Typically, Lynx games, they just sell the lower bowl at Target Center, but demand for tickets so great that when tickets go on sale, like I said, today, 9 a.m., probably already has happened after you're listening to this. Tickets go on sale today. They're opening up the upper bowl for a larger capacity. July 14th, August 24th are the dates for those, and the August 24th game also happens to be the Maya Moore jersey retirement game, so I would imagine those tickets will be in massive demand. So get your tickets, get your chance to see Caitlin Clark. Should be quite a rookie season for her and a great year for the WNBA. That'll do it for me today. Should have a bunch of good stuff coming up later next week. Tons of Wolves talk. I'm sure 2 games will be played before Royce and I talk on Monday. We'll see where the Wolves and Nuggets stand at that point. Twins talk, plenty of that next week. We got Vikings rookie minicamp this week. All sorts of stuff coming up next week. So listen to that. Enjoy your weekend. Until then, I'm Michael Rand, back at it again on Monday.